right, today we're tackling a really heavy and, let's be honest, pretty controversial text. It's called The Genocide and Enslavement of the Hindus. Now, our goal here isn't to tell you what to think, far from it. We're here to unpack its core arguments, to really dig in so that you can think critically about the story it's trying to tell. Ready? Let's get into it. So what's this book all about? Well, here it is in a nutshell. The author makes this massive claim that for more than 1,000 years, there was a systematic, religiously driven campaign of enslavement and genocide against the Hindus of India. I mean, that's a huge assertion, right? It's the bedrock of the entire book. So as we go along, the big question you've got to ask yourself is, okay, how exactly do they try to prove something that big? What's the evidence? The author kicks things off in a pretty interesting place. They take us way back to the 3rd century BC with this quote from a Greek traveler named Megasthenes. He says, "All Indians are free, and no Indian at all is a slave." Now, the book uses this to set a baseline. It's like painting a before picture. The unspoken question is just hanging there in the air. If that was true back then, what on earth happened to change everything? Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down, following the book's own structure. First, we'll look at the clashing worldviews on slavery. Then we'll dive into the centuries of enslavement the author details. After that, we'll touch on the burning of knowledge. And finally, we'll explore what the book says about the lasting impact of this whole narrative. All right, let's jump right into section 1, the different worldviews on slavery. The author argues that before you can even talk about the history, you have to get your head around 2 totally different ideas of what servitude even means. And this is really the cornerstone of the book's whole argument. The author sets up this stark contrast right from the beginning. So on one hand, you have the Sanskrit concept of dasa. The book describes this as one who serves, maybe a servant to a king or a devotee to a god, and argues it wasn't necessarily a derogatory term or forced slavery. But then on the other hand, you have the Quranic term often translated as those whom your right hand possess. The author's position is that this phrase provides a religious green light for what we'd call chattel slavery. So you see, by drawing this incredibly sharp line in the sand, the book sets up the moral and legal foundation for everything it's about to claim. Okay, so now that we have the book's ideological setup, let's move into the second part, centuries of enslavement. This is where the author really pivots from ideas to history, trying to lay out a long, unbroken chain of events to back up their claims. So the book lays out this timeline, right? It starts way back in 710 AD with Muhammad bin Qasim's invasion. Then it moves into the 11th century with Mahmud of Ghazni, then the Delhi Sultanate, and finally the Mughal period. The key thing to understand here is that the author isn't presenting these as separate one-off invasions. No, the argument is that this was one long, continuous policy that stretched for a millennium. And this is where the book starts throwing out some really staggering numbers to try and illustrate the scale of all this. It cites, for instance, that from just one invasion in 1014, Mahmud of Ghazni took 200,000 captives. 200,000 from one place. And the numbers just keep coming. Fast forward to the Delhi Sultanate. The book claims that after the conquest of Kalinjar, Qutbuddin Aibak enslaved 50,000 people. Again, that's from a single campaign. The figures just get bigger. The author points to Sultan Firuz Shah Tughlaq, who they say personally owned 180,000 slaves. 180,000! When you hear numbers like that, it really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? It's not just a historical factoid. What does that kind of mass enslavement actually do to a society, to its very fabric? And this quote, which the book pulls from historian Will Durant, really drives the point home. The claim is that there were so many captives flooding the markets that the price of a human being just plummeted. A person was worth just a few shillings. I mean, think about that. The author uses this to show the ultimate dehumanization, where the sheer number of enslaved people makes a human life economically worthless. Okay, so the book makes a big pivot here in section 3. We're moving from the physical enslavement of people to what the author calls an intellectual genocide, the targeted destruction of knowledge, libraries, and centers of learning. And the prime example the book focuses on is the ancient university of Nalanda. To really get a sense of the loss, the author claims its library held something like 9 million handwritten manuscripts. 9 million. You have to remember, this was long before the printing press. Each one was written by hand. That's an almost impossible amount of knowledge to even imagine, all in one place. Then the book presents this chilling quote from a 13th century historian. It says that after finding all these books, the invaders looked for Hindus to explain them, but the whole of the Hindus had been killed. The author's point here is devastatingly simple. It wasn't just about destroying the books. It was about destroying the people who held the knowledge in the books. It's the complete package. You get rid of the library and the librarians.
All right, so in our final section, the book tries to connect all of this history to the present day. The argument is about the lasting impact, the deep psychological and social scars. The author's point is that this stuff isn't just ancient history. It's had a ripple effect that shapes culture and identity even now.
As a case study, the book points to these rules allegedly imposed on Hindus in Kashmir. I mean, look at them. No new temples, can't ride a horse or carry arms. You can't even build your house in certain neighborhoods. You have to wear different clothes so you're easily identified. The book presents this as a blueprint for systematic degradation. And it forces you to ask a really tough question. What does it do to a person, to community, to live under rules that are designed every single day to remind you that you are inferior? And here is where the author's frustration with modern interpretations really boils over. The argument is that, today, the consequences of these invasions are often twisted around. So things like social problems or divisions are blamed on supposed shortcomings within Hindu society itself, rather than being seen as the direct result of centuries of invasion and subjugation. It's a kind of historical victim blaming, according to the author. And that really brings us to the heart of the matter. The author's final point is that this whole history is just not really talked about, that it's been pushed aside. Now, whether you agree with the book's conclusions or not, it leaves us with a really powerful final question to think about. How do the stories a society tells about its own past, the things it remembers, and maybe more importantly, the things it forgets, how do those stories shape what that society is today and what it's going to be tomorrow? It's a huge question, and there's no easy answer. What do you think? Let us know.